Welcome to the NABS podcast. NABS is the support organisation for those working in advertising, marketing and media. I'm your host, Louise Scody. Each week I'll be chatting with someone from our industry to find out how they support themselves and those around them through challenging times as well as the day-to-day. And it's all to help you support your own mental wellness. I can't wait to start chatting. Alan Stracey is an ICF-certified ADHD coach and founder of Where Focus Goes, a consultancy offering one-to-one coaching, mental health and neurodiversity training to businesses across the creative sector. A former managing director of a London video production agency, Alan knows the creative industry from the inside. His own late diagnosis of ADHD aged 40 led him to retrain as a coach, and he now helps other leaders understand and harness the challenges and strengths of having a big, brilliant brain. Employing a mix of challenge, structure, and ruthless kindness, Alan is a passionate advocate for neurodivergent support in the workplace. And as an associate ADHD coach with NABS, Alan brings that advocacy directly to the people who make advertising and media happen. Welcome, Alan, to the NABS podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you, Louise. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm very, very excited to do this interview, particularly because you have the most wonderful voice. It's a good thing that we're recording this at the end of the day, because I will no doubt be headed to Snoozeville because you're so relaxing to listen to. We couldn't have done it in the morning.
Well, I'm just coming to the end of a really horrible cold. So I've got a bit of Lemsip here with added honey, just to get those vocal cords nice and warm, nice and loosey-goosey.
Well, I'm glad that you and the Lemsip have been able to join us. Now, we always start by talking about a mental wellness challenge. So what is a mental wellness challenge that you have had to face?
Well, take your pick. I've had several, but I'd say the best one.
The best one, like there's the top 5.
Yeah. In no particular order. No, there's one in particular that's it's very apposite to talk about on this podcast, and happened several years ago when I was in my last sort of full-time agency role. And without going into too much detail, I found myself in a difficult situation at work. I was running a small agency, and there were some issues and some grievances that I had that escalated to a point that it started to have quite a devastating impact on my mental health and my life outside of work. And, you know, it's difficult. As a leader, I felt like I should be able to deal with, you know, that kind of stress. And what I didn't know was that I wasn't dealing with the full picture at work. And as a neurodivergent brain, that was sort of catastrophically difficult to deal with. And it got to the point where I really didn't know what I was going to do. And then, you know, as if by magic, a friend from the industry suggested that I speak to the NABS advice line. And I wasn't quite sure what to say or what help was available. But, you know, having spoken to the advice line and just being able to sort of unburden myself was amazing. And, you know, without being too overly dramatic, you know, I definitely say that NABS is the key reason why I'm still here today talking to you. It was that, you know, meant that much at the time. You know, as an independent charity, NABS were able to offer support where, you know, no one else could. And I was able to access guidance and support from a legal perspective and support with my mental health. And I was able to access some career counselling as well, which really helped me consider what sort of strengths I had and really helped me through that really difficult time. And, you know, it took a long time to resolve, and it took a long time for me to then process everything that happened. But one of the positives that came out of that was obviously being introduced to NABS and, you know, being on the sort of the supporting end of that, you know, wonderful, wonderful charity. But also, you know, it taught me a lot about myself and the strengths that I, as a neurodivergent leader in the creative sector, you know, now employ to help other leaders. So I think that's something that, you know, I tell everyone, no matter what you're going through, try and remember something about yourself that you want to hold on to. Try and remember what strengths you have, because it can be really difficult to remember them sometimes. And you'll look back and think, God, I really did all right. You know, I came out of that better, different, but better.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the advice line team was talking to me about something that I've got going on at the moment that I've been through before. And she said, "You've been through it before. So just take a moment to think about what you did to get through it and acknowledge the fact that you have got through this. So you will get through it again." And I guess it's a more elevated version of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, all things must pass, as they say. I mean, I had some really, really difficult and low moments, but I got to the point where I had a very sort of binary decision to make whether I was going to not live or carry on living. And when I'd sort of decided that I was going to carry on, just remembered that, up until that point, I'd survived every single bad day by just getting on with it, in a very sort of stubborn way. And I had to sort of employ that sort of strength. I had to employ that stubbornness to move forward. And just knowing that, yeah, you've survived 100% of your worst days and you just need to kind of find that strength to carry on. Yeah, it can be quite liberating.
I am so sorry that you went through a situation so tough that you were considering ending your life. And I am so glad that NABS were able to support you and that you are now in a position where you can help others.
Thank you.
It's really striking actually, because you're so chilled to talk to that you wouldn't know unless you said that you'd been through such a horrible, tumultuous time.
Mm. I mean, uh, it's funny that I had a lot of other things going on in my life at the same time, and I would sort of tell friends about it, and they would just be going, I mean, how on earth? How on earth are you still here? I mean, it felt like I was juggling bowling balls that had been set on fire. It was relentless. But, I think as someone who survived suicide, as a suicide survivor, as someone who has had very, very difficult times with their mental health and come out of it stronger, I do feel a responsibility to talk about it, to help others, because, I'd say media depictions of mental health, neurodivergence, they're getting better. They're getting a lot better than they have in the past, but there really isn't very much out there about, that immediate sort of picture after you decide not to kill yourself. After you decide to live and to kind of piece yourself back together. For a long time, I was sort of describing where I was to friends. I'd say, in the Shawshank Redemption, he's decided to break out of prison and, he hasn't got out yet. He's not standing in the rain with his shirt off or on the beach talking to Morgan Freeman. He's crawling along that tunnel of shit, for hundreds and hundreds of meters. And that's what it felt like. But I knew that there was a goal and a process, just keep moving forward, keep moving forward. And it's really difficult sometimes. It's really, really appalling, but it gets better, it gets better little by little, day by day, it gets better.
We never hear that. We just hear someone made the very brave decision to live, and then that's that. We never hear the after story. Were you in touch with NABS? Were we supporting you through that crawling through the tunnel phase?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had, access to, therapist, and, I made sure I phoned the advice line, spoke to the person that had dealt with my case. Yeah, as I said, just even when I wasn't accessing, a NAB service, just the reminder that it was there when I needed it felt really amazing. As I said, the period in my life that was the most difficult, I felt like I didn't have, a sort of an option. I didn't have any sort of angels on my shoulder. And knowing that NABs were there and the support, I mean, I had literally no idea what to expect when I called the advice line for the first time. And to sit here now talking to you after, the amazing support that you've been able to offer me, honestly, it's amazing. I'm, shouting from the rooftops about NABs.
I'm so glad that you are. I'm so glad that we helped you. If you're listening and you're in any kind of tricky situation, whether it's as harsh and as stark as where Alan was, or nowhere near that, but still tricky, call the advice line and we will be here for as many conversations as you want. We will hold your hand. We will guide you as to which other of our services might be able to support you. We will pop the links in the show notes. Did
Yeah.
you have your ADHD diagnosis at this point?
Did, but it was still relatively new. I was about a year in. One of the sort of issues that I was dealing with at the time was related sort of to my ADHD. I'd been on some antidepressants in sort of previous years and then started my ADHD medication. It felt great, and I thought, oh, this is brilliant, fantastic. I can probably come off the antidepressants now. And even though I was, you know, doing it very, very slowly, I still managed to fall into a big old pit of despair. So with everything else that was going on at the same time, I also had that going on. Leaning into my neurodivergence was one of the key things that helped me. Before all of this had started to happen, and just after my ADHD diagnosis, I decided to start making some changes to my lifestyle. You know, I had, shall we say, taken advantage of the London kind of late night lifestyle for a number of years, propped up the late night economy single-handedly, quite bravely, I think,
Well done,
for a number
you.
of years. Thank you. And I'm sorry to every pub and club that's now gone out of business because I no longer frequent them. But I decided, started to make a lot of lifestyle changes, stopped drinking. I'm now 4 years sober. At the time, it was the process of leaning into what I knew about how my brain worked and not using it as an excuse, but using it as a reason for why I should actually start doing things a certain way. So, yeah, the help from NABS was great, but the understanding that I was gaining from my diagnosis was also a massive part of that recovery process.
But there are a lot of adults now going for diagnosis as the conversation around ADHD gets louder and louder. What would you say is the advantage of getting a diagnosis later in life? And I appreciate that's quite a large question.
Mhm.
There's that lifestyle management piece. And I have to say, you're not the first ADHD I've spoken to who may have enjoyed a very active relationship with drink and whatever else is out there. That's
Mhm.
very, very common, isn't it? Because of the addictive behavior and the way that the dopamine works and doesn't work in an ADHD brain. So there's that piece. What else? Let's say like you're 40, 45, and all of a sudden you get an ADHD diagnosis. It's not just a question of, I'll take some meds and see what happens.
No, absolutely. And there is this narrative that people might seek a diagnosis to get out of things or to access medication. And let me tell you, the medication that you can get, even the highest dosage of methylphenidate or stimulant medication, is a drop in the ocean compared to the purity of London's finest narcotics. Anyone looking to get an ADHD diagnosis for that reason will be sorely disappointed. So for me, the benefit of having a diagnosis at any age, but later in life especially, is that you get an answer for why you've always felt different, why you've always felt other. Why you may be so brilliant at some things, but then other things feel like you might have to work twice as hard to get half as far. I previously mentioned that I've had some struggles previously with my mental health, and I'd been diagnosed with anxiety and depression in the past. But in truth, those diagnoses, they never really sat right with me. I almost felt like an imposter, which is a very ADHD thing to say.
Yeah.
But it was because a lot of my experiences of the effects of my ADHD, they're very situational. And this is something that, if you talk to any coach, anyone who deals with ADHD or, neurodivergence, they'll tell you that it's incredibly situational for us. And so what I can now identify as my rejection sensitivity, my rejection sensitive dysphoria, ADHD burnout, struggles with my own capacity to regulate my emotional state, they were misunderstood and misdiagnosed. And now I have the language to understand and describe myself. And I think for nothing else, it lets you know that you're not alone,
Yeah.
that there's a community of other big, brilliant brains out there. So many of them in Adland and Marketing Town.
Loads.
Yeah, absolutely loads. So I think just having that answer for why you are the way you are, that you're not a weird horse, you're a normal zebra. you know?
The industry welcomes normal zebras.
Well, do
Or
you know
does
what?
it? Let's discuss.
As
It's
someone
full
who's
of
always
it.
worn their weirdness as a bit of a badge of honor, I say I'm a weird zebra, you know,
Best of both
because
worlds.
yeah, exactly. You can still be a zebra and be fucking weird.
If you get a diagnosis, do you think you should disclose to your employer? I know you're being negligent to them and yourself if you don't disclose.
That's a really good question. There's no right answer to that. I think first and foremost, whether you disclose your diagnosis to your employer, to anyone, to your friends, family, you know, that is a very personal choice. I mean, every ADHD that I've ever met, because we overshare, we could overshare for Britain.
Mhm.
We'll probably tell everyone literally the next day that we've got a diagnosis. But whether you inform your employer, that is something that I'd recommend that you take some time to figure out and maybe talk to some people either in your organization or friends who might be able to guide. I mean, it's worth saying there are a lot of adjustments that you can ask for, a lot of reasonable adjustments, a lot of help that you can get in your workplace that don't rely on a diagnosis being disclosed. You know, there's some really great tools. I know there's one that you guys promote called the Manual of Me,
Yep.
which it's such a great tool. I promote it and, you know, recommend it to all of my clients as well. But it just asks you to consider how you work best. What are the conditions that you work best in? And it doesn't say because of your ADHD or because of your autism or dyslexia. It'll just say, you know, this is the way that I like to receive feedback, for example. This is the way that I like to receive a brief. You know, for me, getting that diagnosis was so affirming because, you know, I'd had a lot of shame and a lot of, you know, I felt really stupid at times because of, like, for example, problems with my working memory.
Yep.
Someone tries to give me a brief verbally, and I no, can't, sorry. But write it down, yeah, no problem. I can process that. Yeah, to answer your question, think about it. It can be worth it because you can then, you know, you can apply to like Access to Work, for example, which is a great initiative from the UK government to enable you to access things like coaching or support. You know, I don't know how you phrased it, but whether it's sort of letting down your employer or sort of failing your employer, I don't know. That's a really difficult one. I mean, as someone who advocates very strongly for the rights and for neurodivergence in the workplace, hmm, that's a really difficult one. And it's a really difficult one to address in the context of the industry that we work in, because
Mm.
I'd say for so many of us, our neurodivergence is probably the reason why we're here. You know, it's our creativity, it's our, you know, ability to kind of ideate, our ability to kind of, you know, see big picture, but lock in and you know, all of that great stuff, pattern recognition, and just, you know, is the reason why we succeed in this industry. You know, there are people saying that neurodivergents are going to be sort of the prized assets of the employment market in the age of AI. You know, whether that's true, I'm not sure. But I would say probably the best thing you can do is to have a conversation with someone you trust, either in your company or outside, and just see how it sits with you before you make a decision.
Yeah. Of course, you've got to work out how you get the diagnosis in the first place. I've noticed an awful lot of organizations out there professing to give diagnoses. How can you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Yes. So again, it's a bit of an unregulated industry out there, which is, yeah, it's troubling. I would say the first port of call for everyone should be your GP. I do have a blog post about this on my site, which I think we're going to link
We
in the
will link to
podcast
that.
description. But yeah, sort of go in and speak to your GP with some sort of solid, considered information about why you think you may have ADHD. And you know what? Be prepared to be dismissed in the first instance. You know, when I first spoke to my GP, they told me, no, you can't have ADHD because you're a managing director,
What?
you know?
That's ridiculous.
I know, but I mean, let's be honest. It was only in 2013 that the DSM, the diagnostic criteria, was updated so that adults could have ADHD as well. Before that, it was assumed that you would age out.
Yeah.
So, you know, this feels like one of these things that feels quite mad to talk about, but we are still, you know, in the early days of good sort of best practice from a diagnostic perspective. Yeah, it is a bit of a Wild West. Some things that you can consider are ADHD UK on the website have a really good self-screener tool that you can use as the basis for talking to your GP. They aren't always 100% useful. They can fail to take into account why many of us seeking a late diagnosis, especially women, have successfully masked or been able to manage their diagnosis without knowing, or sort of creating a sort of workaround for years. But when you are in the NHS diagnosis system, then you'll have a few options. So you'll probably be told, well, it'll be 7, 8, however many years before you can get an NHS diagnosis. So you can go private, which will cost anything up to a few £1,000s. There's right to choose, which some GPs offer, but do your research, because not all diagnoses are created equally. And I think the more confidence you can have with the people doing your diagnosis, the better, because it's important. It can be really life-changing. One thing that I would suggest is that if you do go through either right to choose, or you do go through to a private diagnosis, do ask your GP to be kept on the NHS list for an NHS diagnosis, because as I've found fairly recently, if you get a private diagnosis and then come back into a shared care agreement with your medication and then move to a different part of the country and go to a GP surgery that does not accept shared care agreements, then you can lose your medication.
To explain a shared care agreement,
Mm.
that's when you have your diagnosis done privately, but the medication is administered via the GP. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, in so many words. So you would get a private diagnosis, and then they would go through the process of titration, so working out what the best variant of the medication options are suitable for you. There are stimulant medications, non-stimulant medications. I personally started on one medication, felt great. Honestly, I felt like Superman taking that medication, but then within a few months, I had some sort of difficult side effects. So I switched to another one, which was fine. And so when you're stable and, you seem to be tolerating the dose well, then the private clinic will initiate a shared care agreement so that you can get your medication on the NHS prescription rather than paying privately.
Okay, so listen to Alan and make sure you stay on the NHS list as well, so that you don't have any difficulties should you go on medication. Now,
Yes. And that's a very personal thing. You don't have to go on medication.
no, you
Just,
don't have to
again,
go. No, you don't. You can do ADHD coaching, which is what
can
you
do
offer
ADHD
with
coaching.
NABS. So
Indeed.
that's something that can work alongside medication, or you could use instead of medication as a support mechanism. How does it work? So if I come to a NABS ADHD coaching session with you, how would it help me?
Well, with NABS and with my sort of private practice, everyone starts off with a 30-minute sort of discovery call, so I can really work out where the challenges are, what you'd like to achieve through coaching, and where that person would be at with their ADHD journey. For me, the three things that really, really helped me were getting the diagnosis itself, and then medication, massive help. But then when I started working with my own coach, my own ADHD coach, that was massive. It was such a brilliant process. So I'd never had coaching before, and, I was sort of really interested in how it worked. And so a coaching conversation is effectively a sort of a safe space to do some of your best thinking, to kind of really have the sort of the time and the space and, a good partner there to help you work out what's going on for you. Because, ADHD is so nuanced and it is so kind of personal to that individual person. Everyone's ADHD is kind of unique to themselves. And then if you throw in the kind of intersectional lens of that person, sort of whether they're rich, poor, male, female, racialized, black, brown, white, all of their intersectional identity has an impact on how they've experienced their own ADHD. So it's giving that person the space to kind of understand their ADHD, make peace with it, I suppose, And then, there's time for bringing structures and, tools, techniques to bear on, what might work for you. And again, it has to be personal because, what works for some people won't work for others. And so, again, ADHD coaching, because it's that kind of one-on-one partnership with someone who, is there to kind of really guide you to a goal. That for me was, brilliant. And now I've retrained and now I can offer that through NABS is yeah, it's a great feeling.
There's definitely that notion of partnership, and also similar but different because my daughter's ADHD and we had a few sessions with a coach who coaches parents of ADHD kids. And there's a permission piece there that I found really affirming and helpful. So my child can't get dressed by herself in the morning. Get dressed, I'll say. 15 minutes later, I'll go into her room and she's doing something completely unrelated to getting dressed. And she will have got sidetracked here, there, and everywhere. And she's 8, right? So she's old enough to do it. And the session gave me the permission to realize just because she's old enough doesn't mean she's going to do it because she's got ADHD. So she's different. And he said to me, just dress her because you won't be dressing her when she's 15. You just need to get it done now so that you can all get out of the door and get to school.
Yeah.
And it's just having someone who's got the insight to tell you that it's okay to do something that most of the outside noise out there is saying is not okay.
Yeah. I can deeply, deeply, deeply recognize that story with my own daughter. And sometimes it's not the best thing and it's not the way that we think we should get things done, but it's the way that it'll get done. It's kind of the path of least resistance. And if it's working that day, just go with it. Just do it. Because what's the alternative? We're going to sit there and we're going to sort of shout and scream at each other and get really stressed out and be late for work and probably have tears streaming down our face when we go to work, school.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to do that. So, exactly right. It's not going to be happening when she's 15, potentially. It might.
Let's assume not.
Let's assume. Let's hope. But, at the end of the day, you've got to, especially with ADHD kids, and I know that we're talking about adults here, but, with any ADHD, you kind of got to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
You've got to assume good intent, and then you've got to meet them where they are. And that can be in the form of, workplace adjustments. It can be just kindness, just offering kindness, because, ADHDers, there's a stat which it kills me. ADHDers are average supposed to receive 20,000 more negative comments from our parents and peers before the age of 12 than our neurotypical peers.
Yeah, that's so sad, especially because rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So each one of those comments is going to cut really deep.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. The hell that is rejection sensitive dysphoria is, it's just an awful, awful thing that, any perceived slight or, negative sentiment it really hurts. Any actual, bit of negative feedback, oh my God, it cuts like a knife. It feels like a gut punch. And so to grow up with that and then, you take it all to heart and it becomes your personality. So you think, I must be crap. I must be a terrible person because I can't do all this stuff. And you wear it like a big shitty, heavy overcoat. And it's, when I talk about late diagnosis, that it feels like it's the first step of taking that sort of horrid, sort of lot of negativity off.
So that said, taking into account that an ADHD may well have had years of having extra criticism and dealing with that and feeling very bruised coming into the workplace and, even after 5, 10 years, 15 years, getting to a senior position and still holding all of that. If you're in that position, how can you best support your mental wellness in the workplace? Yes, there's that practical piece of using something like Manual of Me and saying, okay, this is how I want to receive feedback, because as an ADHD, feedback can cut you like a knife. But what else can you do to support your mental wellness in the workplace? Recognizing that not every employer may be on board.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I say to people, the best way for an ADHD to show up in the workplace is kind of as authentically as possible. And, speaking as a former manager and employer, you would never want people to feel the need to mask or to hide aspects of their authentic selves. But you also have to recognize that some working environments can be challenging. They can be rife with difficulties, especially for anyone with a neurodiversity diagnosis or a suspected diagnosis. And so I suppose what I would suggest or ask of people is that, taking that idea of realizing how they show up best, but taking it further and just invest some time to think about how you work best, why you sort of work well in certain situations, why you might not work well in other situations, and then really start to get to know yourself. It is hard. It's really difficult to kind of look at yourself when you're so used to looking at yourself through a negative lens. But, for me, that's what coaching does so well. Because there is the areas of, kindness, there's the challenge. And I won't stand for any negative self-talk from my clients. I won't hear it.
Quite right too.
But you have to stop people going into this story of, oh, but I can't because I'm really bad at this. No, shut the fuck up. Sorry. You got to stop talking. Tell me something good about yourself. Tell me the last time you felt exceptional. Tell me the last time that you did something so good that you surprised yourself. And you find that people, they struggle, but they do get there. They get there and they realize, oh my God, do you know what? I am actually pretty good. I am really good at this. And you know what? The world is a weird and scary and pretty messed up place. And we're just kind of getting on with it. We're just kind of trudging. And yeah, sometimes you've got to do that. But really, you've got to give yourself a bit of grace, give yourself a bit of kindness. I use this term like ruthless kindness.
Yeah, what is that? What does that mean? How is it in practice?
You'll find a lot of ADHDers, a lot of people with neurodiversity diagnoses, we're really brilliant at stuff. There's a load of us as entrepreneurs, I would hazard a guess that most of the leadership of the advertising sector is neurodiverse in some form or another. And we can be really ruthless when we need to be. We can be really ruthless with our time. We can be really ruthless creatively. We can be really ruthless with business decisions. But when was the last time you were really ruthlessly kind to yourself? Do you know what? What I need right now is a bit of fucking grace. I need a bit of kindness in my life, and I am going to give it to myself. Honestly, before I did all this, I couldn't tell you the last time I just went, do you know what? I am going to do something so kind to myself. I'm going to shock the world with how kind I can be. That's what we need. We need to, be kind to ourselves, understand ourselves, and really just give ourselves a bit of a break.
So getting away from that negative self-talk, and then is there something active you can do? You mentioned having a think about your strengths. Is there anything else kind of active, maybe a quick 5-minute bit of kindness in a tough working day? So a practice that you could activate there.
Yeah, I mean, I always advocate for just getting outside and touching some grass. Difficult
Yeah.
in London, but hey, Soho Square's a banger. We know it is. It's so good. You know what? Giving yourself, finding little ways to be kind to yourself throughout the day is key. It's not always possible, but when I was living in London and commuting sort of 5 days a week, I'd always try and do like something really kind for someone else. Even if it's, letting a little old lady get on the escalator before you, or,
Yeah, because
holding
it gives
door,
you a buzz as well.
It totally does. It really does. At Christmas, I volunteered at a shelter, and I was selfishly kind there because the buzz that I got from that was really good. I felt helping other people is scientifically one of the best things you can do to improve your own morale and mental health. And it's absolutely true. So go out and sort of help others. But, if there are any sort of leaders from Adlan listening, recognize whether you're neurodiverse or not, but recognize that you've got a sort of responsibility and power to really make a difference to the working conditions that your team are operating in. Little changes can make real big differences. So, sometimes we're not even sure what the policies are. We're not even sure like what's in our power to do. But, go and find out, work out what you can do. Even doesn't have to be, a big summer party. It doesn't have to be big things. It can be small gestures. but they can make a huge amount of difference.
Well, arguably, it's smaller yet more regular gestures that are going to keep people topped up.
Mhm.
More than the occasional big bang of a party, which is all very nice, but actually you want your working day to be easier, don't you? Run Managers Mindsets, our really popular training program, and within that we have a couple of modules that are geared towards helping managers to understand how you create more inclusive cultures where people feel heard and seen and supported. And it sounds as though they could be really useful as people investigate how they can better support neurodivergent colleagues. So we'll pop a link to that as well. How does the Adland community lift you up?
I mean, I have met so many brilliant people throughout my time in, you know, in the creative industries, and sometimes you'll work really closely with people, and they'll go on to, I have 3-4 of my best friends I've met throughout, working in the sector. People that I'll be friends with them for the rest of my life. I'm 100% sure. But then, yeah, sometimes you have these people, these kind of often freelance kind of maniac hired guns that sort of come in and, they just show up for a few days and completely blow you away with their sort of talent and brilliance and tenacity. And then they're gone, and you never see them again. And you're like, God, do you remember that guy? Oh, yeah, absolute lunatic. But, what a guy. Came in, just saved everything and then left. I love that. And you don't really get it in any other line of work.
What's one thing you've learned about how to support yourself?
Well, it's one thing that's sort of lots of little things, but it's the work. It's spending time getting to know myself, being able to kind of know how I work best to, be the person that I sort of am, my authentic self, rather than the person that I really want to be or the person that I'm worried that people think I am. That's been, I think, the biggest gift that I've been able to give myself. And as I said, it's work. It doesn't stop. You kind of have to keep going. I think for me, it's meant that I've been able to sort of stop people pleasing and just be happy with who I am for the first time.
Is an incredible end, especially considering where you were at the beginning of your journey and where you are now, where you're feeling happy, you're in your own skin and you're helping other people. You've gone from using NAB services to being one of our leaders in NAB services. And you're still here with us, which is absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much. And as
Thank you, Louise.
predicted, I feel utterly relaxed despite the highly emotional nature of the conversation. I feel super relaxed because your voice is amazing. So
Thank you.
if
If anyone is listening, I am available for voiceovers.
you're going to get so much work. Two things will happen after this podcast. Number one, Soho Square is going to be full of people who work in Adelaide without their shoes on, running around on the grass. Number two,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get a lot of voiceover work, especially for Insomniac adverts and products, because it's just so relaxing to listen to you.
Well, hopefully some people might want to talk to me about coaching as well. And if you
Yeah, that
do,
too. Small matter of
Um,
ADHD coaching. We're going to pop all those links in so you can find out how you can
absolutely.
get ADHD coaching through NABS. And you
Mm-hmm.
can also go directly to his practice website as well. And we've mentioned a bunch of other tools and resources that we will make sure to list down there as well. In the meantime, Alan, genuinely, it's been an absolute pleasure talking and listening to you. And just sad that you're using your superpowers for good. It's amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Louise. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to you and everyone at NABS for the work that you do.